Have you ever been alone in a place that feels older than it is? Not in a city, not surrounded by people, but out on a back road, deep in a forest, right at the edge of the light where sounds get weird and you can't quite judge the distance anymore? It's in these places that a certain figure is said to appear over and over again. It's described as upright, broad-shouldered, and deliberate in its movements. But most of all, it's described as wrong in a way that's hard to put into words. Not quite human, not quite animal, but something that sits uncomfortably in between. Across decades and all over the world, people give it different names, but the silhouette stays the same. Dogman. What makes this story so unsettling isn't just where these encounters happen, but how often they're repeated and how eerily similar the details are, even when the witnesses have absolutely nothing in common. These aren't just fleeting shadows or a quick blur in your peripheral vision. People describe its posture, the way its muscles move, the eye contact, and almost every time they mention the distinct, chilling sense that whatever they were looking at was aware it was being seen. This idea isn't new, it's ancient. More than 2,000 years ago, a Greek physician named Ctesias wrote about distant lands inhabited by beings he called the cynocephali dog-headed men. But he didn't describe them as monsters, he described them as people. He wrote that they could speak, lived in organized societies, and occupied the very borders of the known world. Around that same time in Egypt, judgment in the afterlife was overseen by Anubis, a figure with a human body and the head of a jackal. These weren't beasts to be hunted. They were symbols of power, judgment, and guardianship. It's fascinating that across cultures separated by vast oceans and different beliefs, humans kept returning to this same form when trying to imagine authority, danger, and the boundary between civilization and the untamed wilderness. As centuries passed, the meaning of this figure began to change. In medieval Europe, the symbolism hardened into a direct threat. Stories of werewolves spread like wildfire through villages and the countryside, and they weren't just seen as metaphors or entertainment. People genuinely locked their doors at night, whispered prayers, and spoke of upright wolf-like creatures seen watching from the tree lines and lonely paths. If you look at artwork from that period, you'll find figures standing on two legs, with elongated faces and forward-facing eyes. They aren't shown running wild, they're observing. When these stories crossed the Atlantic to the Americas, the pattern didn't just disappear, it adapted. Many indigenous North American traditions already had stories of shapeshifters beings that could move between forms and guarded sacred boundaries, not just specific places. But in the late 19th century, the figure sharpened into something more specific. In 1887, two lumberjacks in the forests of Michigan reported a terrifying encounter. They saw a massive, upright figure with a dog-like head and a broad chest. It didn't charge them, just stood there, growled, and then vanished back into the trees. From that point on, Michigan developed its own unique version of the legend, the Michigan Dogman, a creature said to appear every 7 years. The legend got a strange boost in 1987 when a local radio DJ wrote a song about the creature. Partly as a nod to folklore and partly as a joke, the song eventually faded from the airwaves. The reports did not. They kept coming. Let's jump back a few decades, to 1936, near Jefferson, Wisconsin. A man named Mark Shackleman claimed he encountered something digging at an ancient burial mound. He described it as having pointed ears, visible fangs, and an upright stance. He also claimed it spoke a single guttural word before running off. Wisconsin would soon become one of the most consistent locations for similar encounters, often happening along quiet roads and rural farmland. Journalist Linda Godfrey documented many of these cases in incredible detail, including what became known as the Beast of Bray Road. Witness after witness described the same things: deliberate movements, clear sense of awareness, and behavior that just didn't match any known animal. And time and again, people came back to that same unsettling detail, the feeling that they were being watched back. In our modern era, you'd think these stories would fade away, but they haven't. They've multiplied. Podcasts, videos, and online forums are filled with reports of glowing eyes, large tracks, and encounters where the figure doesn't flee when it's noticed. Some people insist these creatures are actively stalking them. Others argue for simpler explanations: bears walking on their hind legs, large wolves, simple misidentification, or elaborate hoaxes. And yet, the descriptions continue to line up. Even when the witnesses have no connection to one another, and have never heard these other stories. This is where the story turns inward, from the woods to our own minds. Human perception is not a neutral, perfect camera. It evolved for one primary purpose: survival. In darkness or in unfamiliar territory, our brain's pattern recognition system kicks into overdrive. A random movement becomes a sign of intention. Ambiguity becomes a potential threat. We are particularly sensitive to predators that can stand upright because long before recorded history, something did hunt our ancestors. Add in the powerful ingredients of isolation, fear, and cultural memory, and the mind starts to fill in the blanks. Not because it's foolish, but because it's doing exactly what it was designed to do: keep you alive by assuming the worst. So maybe the Dogman isn't a physical creature hiding in forests or stalking back roads. Maybe it's a shape that the human mind naturally returns to when fear needs a form. A figure that appears whenever we feel watched, outmatched, or pushed back toward the edge of the wild, where our modern comforts can't protect us. Perhaps it's not a monster in the woods, but a mirror, reflecting how our own minds respond to deep primal uncertainty. What this enduring story really shows us about human behavior is simple and profound. We don't understand what's out there in the dark. We don't imagine nothing. We imagine something. That something often looks just enough like us to be truly terrifying. And once we give that fear a shape, a name, and a story, it doesn't even need to be real to keep coming back. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing for more explorations into the strange and unexplained. Stay curious.